The file should not have existed. That was my first thought when the retrieve alarm set it on my reading table. Not the mild curiosity of an archivist finding a misfiled record, but something older and less comfortable. A tightening across the secondary gill plates, a stillness in the hands. The designation label on the outer sleeve was so faded the ink had become part of the material itself, inseparable from the fiber, as though the vault had grown around it rather than received it. Terran Sector, sealed, do not revise. I had been the third keeper of sealed designations for 11 standard rotations. In that time I had audited 406 entries, most of them dull. Collapsed stellar bodies removed from navigable lanes, biological quarantine zones from plagues that had burned themselves out centuries ago, memorial designations marking where old empires had been. Each one had a reason, each one had an author, each one could be traced to a specific council session, a specific voice, a specific date. The Terran file had none of these. What it had in the space where the authoring body's seal should have been was a mark I did not recognize. A horizontal line with a single downward stroke at its midpoint. Not a glyph from any civilization currently registered in the continuity's records. Not from any defunct member state I had cataloged in the previous decade. Something older than the continuity's own founding charter, into the sleeve in a pigment that had not faded in the same way as the surrounding ink. It looked, if I am being precise, as though it had been applied recently, as though whoever made it was still alive to touch things. I opened the sleeve. First document was what I expected. A standard forbidden zone notation, the kind drafted in triplicate during the continuity's third expansion period. Terran Sector had been designated inaccessible following what the notation called total non-return of survey elements. 14 survey vessels. No distress signals. No wreckage recovered. The boundary had been established by extrapolating their last known trajectories and drawing a margin wide enough that no vessel could accidentally cross it. The notation was signed by a council moderator I did not recognize. When I searched the index for her name, the index returned nothing. I wrote that in my margin notes. Name absent from index. Unusual. The second document was older. The paper stock, and it was paper, which placed it outside the continuity's record-keeping tradition entirely, was at the edges, but intact at the center, as though someone had stored it, with extraordinary care, for an extraordinary length of time. Was not Solon. It took me a long moment to identify it as Vithara, the written form of a species extinct for so long that their language is studied only as academic curiosity. The Vithara had been the galaxy's oldest known spacefaring civilization, before the continuity absorbed what little remained of their successor states. I know enough Vithara to read a warning. The word for do not appears 5 times in a single paragraph. The gist of it, translated as faithfully as I can manage. The Terran Sector was known to the Vithara before it was known to anyone else. They had mapped it. They had sent vessels to its inner system. Some had returned. The ones that returned were the ones that had turned back early, before entering the gravity shadow of the third planet. The ones that pressed further, the notation is careful here, did not return in the way that vessels return. The Vethara word used is one I had to look up. It translates, approximately, as ceased to have ever been. Not destroyed. Ceased to have ever been. I sat with that translation for a while. The vault around me was quiet. The Solon vault of unrevised designations is kept at a temperature slightly below comfortable, and the light is the dim amber used to preserve old materials. And in that amber silence, I became aware that I was breathing with more deliberation than usual. Slow, controlled, the way you breathe when you do not want to make a sound. I turned to the third document. It was not a document in any sense I would normally apply to the word. It was a piece of material I cannot identify. Not paper, not polymer, not any process substrate in the continuity's materials registry, and on it, in a script I cannot identify, were marks arranged in what appeared to be 2 columns. The left column was long. The right column, opposite each entry on the left, contained a single mark that repeated without variation all the way down the page. I have spent 6 years studying extinct written systems. The left column, I believe, is a list of names, species names or fleet designations or perhaps the names of specifics. The list is very long. I stopped counting at 140. The right column's single repeating mark. I cannot say with certainty what it means. I know what it looks like. It looks like the Vithara word for ceased to have ever been. 140 entries, all the same. I did not read further that night. I returned the file to its sleeve, set the sleeve on the retrieval arm, and requested it be returned to the vault's deepest archive, the unlit corridor where the oldest designations are kept, the ones sealed before my office existed, before the continuity existed, before any bureaucracy existed to explain why they were sealed. I flagged it with the highest access restriction available to my rank. Then I sat at my reading table and did something I have not done since I was a cadet. I reviewed the standard Forbidden Zone entry one more time, the plain language. 14 survey vessels, no return. Boundary established at safe margin. The entry says nothing about why they went in. It says nothing about what the survey logs, if any were recovered, ported before contact was lost. It says nothing about the third planet, or the gravity shadow, or the Vithara who came before us and thought about this long enough to press a warning into paper they knew would outlast their civilization. It says nothing about the mark in the column. It says nothing about the species on that list. Here is what I know, sitting in the amber light of the Solon Vault with my margin notes in front of me. Terran's sector was feared before humans built their first vessel. It was designated before any council voted on it. The Vithara, the oldest spacefaring species we have ever found evidence of, turned their ships around before reaching the third planet's shadow, and wrote a warning so urgent they used their word for absolute cessation 5 times in a single paragraph. They turned around. They wrote the warning. They did not come back to revise it, because they did not need to. The question I have not asked aloud, the question I will not file in any report, is this. The Vithara were afraid of the Terran sector before humans were old enough to be feared. Whatever they encountered, or declined to encounter, in that gravity shadow was not a young species with warships and a territorial instinct. It was something else. Something that was there first, something that arrived later and stayed, or something that does not move at all in the way that things we understand are capable of moving. Humans, as far as the continuity's records can confirm, are extraordinary. Their history of non-return statistics is longer than any species we have studied. Their refusal to yield, their strange attachment to a world that has tried to kill them repeatedly, their patience, all of it remarkable, all of it sufficient to explain why the boundary stays drawn. But the Terran sector was designated before any of that. Filed my audit report the next morning, standard language, designation reviewed, rationale confirmed, no revision recommended. I used the word standing in the outcome field, which, in the continuity's bureaucratic grammar means, this will not be looked at again in my lifetime, or the next archivist's lifetime, or the lifetime of any institution currently operating. It means the file goes back into the dark corridor, and no retrieval arm is sent for it unless someone makes a specific, documented, high-clearance request that would require explaining to a great many people why they want to know. No one will make that request. The beings who might have made it are on that list. And the mark beside their names is the same one, 140 times. I did not mention the third document in my report. I did not mention the unidentified material, or the unidentified script, or the list with its single, repeating mark. I did not mention the mark on the outer sleeve that looked too fresh. The designation for the Terran sector stands. It will continue to stand. Not because of council vote or survey data or the memory of 14 lost vessels, because there is a corridor in this vault where the oldest things are kept, and at the back of that corridor, there is a file that was placed there before the corridor existed, and whatever placed it there knew that someone would eventually open it, and knew that the person who opened it would be wise enough to close it again. I am that person. I closed it. We tell the younger species that human space is forbidden because of what humans are. That is true. It is also the version of the truth that allows them to sleep. The other version is in the file. The file is sealed. It will stay that way.